All right, perfect. Ladies and gents, welcome back to another week of Mind Over Markets. Thank you all for tuning in this morning. I know I've got you all on a nice and bright and early Saturday morning as usual. Today we're going to be talking about an important topic, probably one that has been anticipated probably since the beginning of the boot camp. I've purposefully waited for, I guess, this week. I've structured all of the sessions in this way for today's session to be where it is. And it's because it's going to start to incorporate a lot of the other things that we've been talking about. And so you'll find that if you're up to date with all of the sessions that we've done, some of the things that we're going to be discussing today are not going to be new. They're not going to be unfamiliar. Hopefully, they're all going to start to sound a little bit more familiar and start to give you some context as to how we go about fixing some of these issues. So today, for anyone, I presume most of you have seen from the title of the Zoom session, we're going to be talking about emotions. Now, what I ideally want to do today, and again, this is something we can carry on into the coming week, is I don't actually want to focus on any one specific emotion. The thing that I tend to find with most traders is they experience a variety of emotions for a variety of different reasons because they all have a variety of different belief systems, right? I could experience an event which could piss me off completely, but somebody else could experience the exact same thing and it may not impact them in the same way. And it's because we have different beliefs, different experiences, different thought processes. We're all different human beings, and that means our reaction to a situation is always going to be different based on essentially what we have experienced, believe, what we think, what we feel in that specific moment. It's all going to change how we react in specific situations. So today, I don't want to discuss, I'm not going to go through and pick out this is how you fix this emotion or this is how you fix this emotion. What I've essentially planned out here is a framework. This framework you can essentially apply to any emotion that you experience. And I believe if you tackle both of these areas, you're going to do yourself some justice to figure out how to overcome that emotion. So today, what I want to do is talk about some of the common emotions that you experience, break down the psychology behind why we tend to experience them. And again, the primary purpose of giving you that understanding is to help you or remind you guys that all emotions serve a purpose. Emotions are not against us, emotions are not the problem. And the way you overcome them is you have to create peace with them rather than trying to fight them, right? This has been a common consensus of what we've talked about over the last few weeks. And when you understand that they are a normal part of the human experience, then you start to be more accepting of them. And this puts you in the right mindset to then actually start applying some solutions. Excuse me. So I want to talk about a few things today. Let me switch over to my whiteboard. One sec, let me put my chat back up. Okay, perfect. I'm hoping everyone can see the whiteboard all clearly. We're going to start off, and again, we're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. I want this to be as personalized to you guys as possible. I want to start off by asking you guys, what specific emotions do you guys experience that you feel is limiting your performance in the markets? I've got some common ones already written out and documented, but if there are specific ones that you guys feel like you're struggling with or ones that come up a lot for you guys, feel free to share them inside the Zoom chat. If you want to unmute yourself, feel free to unmute yourself. I'll give you guys a few seconds, otherwise I'll start noting down some of the most common ones that I tend to experience or I get told about, which causes people some issues. Okay, first one we got anxiety. Again, very, very common one. Anxiety to enter the market. Anybody else? Anybody else have any specific emotions that you feel like you experience that limits your performance? Anger when I lose a trade. Okay. Anger, we've got impatience. Anybody else struggle with FOMO? Another very, very common and powerful emotion for a lot of people. I thought that'd probably be on the case. Impatience, we've already got. One that I think some struggle with, self-belief. Fear is a good one. Fear is actually an interesting one to put because we're going to talk a lot more about that in a second. But this covers probably a pretty good range, which encompass probably a lot of different issues and reactions to these emotions, because that's the primary thing I want to point out at the start, right? Actually, everything that we've listed on the board is a problem, but it's not actually a problem. And what I mean by that is most people focus on these specific things. They say, I'm not successful, or I'm not making the amount of money that I want to make, or I'm giving too much money away because I experience anxiety, anger, impatience, FOMO. I lack self-belief. I have fear around X, Y, and Z, right? But actually, it's not the emotion. And this is the thing that I want to clarify, and the message that I get across to most people when we go about these sessions, which is emotions are rarely ever the actual problem. More often than not, what we have to understand is emotions are just a symptom of the problem, right? And the best way that I describe this is something that I've probably or may have mentioned on some of our previous sessions, is helping you guys to understand that the best way to view emotions are just like having a warning light on your car, right? If you're driving a car and you have your dash in front of you, you see the engine management light, you get a low tire signal, low oil, the petrol light, something comes on. Some kind of warning light indicates you that there's a potential issue. Now, all of these things don't necessarily indicate that the car's just going to break down immediately and blow up. It's rarely ever the case. The purpose of the warning light is to let you know that there is something that it has detected beneath the surface that you need to be aware of, right? Now, when you get a warning light in your car, you don't ever just pull up on the side of the road, park up, decide to walk away for 10, 15, 20 minutes, come back, get in your car, and hope and pray that the warning light has disappeared, right? If there is a warning light that has appeared in your car, it's there for a reason, and it's there to show you that there's an underlying problem that needs to be addressed. And if you don't address the problem, then it's likely to lead to a bigger issue. Your emotions are exactly the same way, and people tend to deal with them in the ironic way in which I just described, right? Most people experience emotions, and their first way to try and fix them is they say, well, I'm just going to walk away. I'm going to go away for 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm going to wait till the emotions die down, and then I'm going to come back, and everything will be okay. Now, can that be effective? 100%, right? Time fixes the majority of your emotions. It gives you perspective. It allows you to overcome at least some of that immediate impulse that you're feeling, but it doesn't resolve the underlying problem, right? Walking away when you experience an emotion is just like taking paracetamol or painkillers when you have a headache. If you don't really understand what is causing the headache, then the painkiller is only going to mask the problem. It doesn't ever fix the underlying issue. And so I share with most people that your emotion is not the problem, because if you experienced an emotion, but you never acted on the emotion, then the emotion has no power over you. It has no ability to actually control anything that you do going forward. And therefore, it becomes powerless, right? So the first thing I want you guys to do off the back of today is I want you to start to reframe what emotions are. And that is, if you are someone that has jumped onto this session and you're in the mindset that it's these emotions which are the reason that you're not as successful as you think or want to be in any particular time, and situation, then that's a mindset that you need to change from the very get-go, right? Emotions are not the problem. They are usually just a symptom of a deeper underlying problem. Now, excuse me. Before we move on from this and talk a little bit about the psychology behind some of these emotions, I want you all to recognize, and again, something that we've talked about a lot, I think I mentioned this right from our first session together, I want you to remember that most of the reason that we have an issue or a problem in trading is because of this dynamic that the mind works in, which is we are constantly moving away from pain and we are constantly trying to find a reward. So the thing that I want you to remember throughout this process is every single one of these emotions that we've talked about up here, they are all basically a result of our mind trying to alleviate some short-term pain and this trying to find some kind of reward off the back of this. So your mind is always moving away from pain, discomfort, right? And so I want you to look at these emotions and I want you to understand that in the vast majority of these situations, your mind is making you do something bad or making it attractive to do something bad simply because your mind is wired to help you to avoid pain, right? NNM says also looking for survival, 100%, right? Part of this survival mechanism is why we try and avoid pain, because our mind looks at the best way to survive is to not feel pain, not feel discomfort, not feel fear, right? When your mind experiences all these things, it goes into the natural fight or flight mode, and then it becomes very impulsive. It becomes very emotional. It becomes very reactive because it understands, at least from how we've evolved from many, many years ago, sometimes making decisions slowly is not the best way to get the results that you need. If you were stranded in the middle of a jungle and a tiger or a lion jumped out in front of you, are you going to sit there and be like, you know, wait a second, let me plan out. I could take this route, or I could take this route, or I could run backwards, or I could try and fight the lion. Like, these are all the potential options. Let me sit down for 5 minutes and try and plan what I should do. You do that, you're going to get fucked up by the lion, right? What you need to do in specific situations is you need to be able to act impulsively. And when your mind is filled with stress, cortisol, adrenaline, discomfort, pain, this is how your mind starts to think. It starts to moving to this fight or flight mode. And instinctively, we are more likely to act on impulse. This is why we feel like we can't control what we're doing, because your mind is so basically wired to react to those specific situations. And this is why we feel like you lack a lot of control. So in every one of these situations, I want you to come back to this core idea of what we've discussed since the very beginning, which is your mind is simply moving you away from pain. It is constantly seeking rewards. And as NNM mentioned, it's doing this for the purpose of survival. Okay? So this is our core foundation. This is the thing that I want you guys to understand most right at the beginning of this session. Emotions are not the problem. Emotions are usually just a symptom of the problem. And a big part of why you experience them and why you react the way that you do is a natural part of the way that we are wired, right? Our mind is constantly trying to alleviate and avoid painful situations. It's constantly looking for a reward, and the primary purpose behind doing that is usually survival. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take usually what is experienced as a variety of emotional situations and trying to give you guys some logic and context behind exactly what you're experiencing. And this is a lot of what this, I guess, problem is for a lot of people. It's basically separating the ability to be logical and emotional and helping you guys to understand that there is a reason and a rationale behind why we experience all of these things. And the more we can understand them, the better we're going to be at overcoming and dealing with them. Okay, so let's dive into a little bit behind the psychology behind why we experience some of these emotions. Now, we'll talk about a few very, very common examples, right? Some of them we've already listed on the whiteboard to the left. We're going to start off with a very, very common one. We'll talk about things like FOMO, right? FOMO, for example, can be broken down into two different things. It can be broken down into fear, and it can be broken down into missing out. And you know that exactly by the name, the fear of missing out, right? Fear, something that we've talked about during these sessions before. I believe when we talked about attachment, we talked about the idea that in most situations, what we are most fearful of is we're either fearful of being wrong or we're fearful of losing money. And usually, for some people, it's both of those things that control us. For some of us, it's usually one of them that is more powerful than the other. The second side to FOMO is the missing out side, right? We are wired as human beings to naturally want to fit in with our surroundings. And therefore, when we see other people doing or achieving something, it makes us want to fit in with those particular surroundings. And therefore, that desire to not miss out on a particular situation becomes very, very overwhelming, becomes very, very powerful. But again, it's designed, it's part of our human nature to be responsive to both of these emotions. So when you experience FOMO, it's not because you're a degenerate gambler. It's not because you lack an amazing amount of self-control or you have no discipline. It's because in the vast majority of situations, we as human beings are designed to react to fear, and we're designed to want to fit in with the people around us. You combine the both of these together and you add the element of actually managing and risking money for a living, and actually it becomes a very, very powerful emotion that most of us don't really know how to deal with. But again, the idea that I'm getting across here is that it's completely natural for the vast majority of us, right? The second one, I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail because losing money is a very, very powerful emotion. It tends to drive a lot of the emotions that we've discussed, whether it's based on fear, whether it basically drives FOMO in and of itself. This could even drive a little bit of impatience. Depending on what you want to do, you might have lost money. It might make you more impatient to jump back into the market and make it. And essentially, what I want you guys to understand from a psychological level, we experience something called loss aversion. This is the idea that most human beings feel the pain of a loss almost twice or thrice as much as the pain of an equivalent gain, right? If you were to go out and lose $100 tomorrow and then make $100 the next day, the $100 loss will, for most people, will naturally feel way more impactful. And this is something, again, I want you guys to be mindful of. We are in the business of risking money essentially for a living. And when we are wired to essentially stray away from losing money on a day-to-day basis, this is naturally going to go against most of the things that we believe in. So naturally moving away from losses in the vast majority of cases is going to end up working against us. And it's a natural part of the human programming that we experience that we have to understand it exists and we have to learn how to recognize it and change our response to it. For some of us, losing money really impacts our self-esteem, right? It impacts our ability to feel good or feel pride or feel confident about what we're doing in a particular situation. For some people, it impacts something so deep inside of us that it becomes very, very painful. And hence we fall victim to a lot of the common emotional traps that a lot of people tend to experience. Now, linked with this, we talked about this idea that a lot of people also don't like the idea of being wrong. For a lot of people, it has a huge hit on their ego because a lot of people believe that their job as a trader is to predict the markets. When you believe your core purpose as a trader is to predict, and then your predictions are wrong, it's going to hit your ego. It's going to feel like a blow to you. It's going to feel like you're not good enough. It's going to feel like you're not smart enough. It's going to feel like you're not capable enough. And all of these things they can cut very, very deep and then make it much more likely that, again, you're going to respond emotional. Now, again, in the vast majority of situations, you have a conflicting belief system here, right? Something that we've talked about on previous sessions is that we all tend to come to trading with this idea that if you're wrong in a situation, you can't be successful. This is what we've been taught at school, in life, growing up, in the playground, whatever it is, right? We are taught that in order to be successful, in order to win, in order to make money, in order to survive in the modern day world, you have to be right. We're rewarded for that, and that's ingrained into us when we do exams, when we go through the typical educational system, what we're taught at home, right? You aren't ever rewarded by your parents or guardians normally for doing bad things, right? If you've skived off school, if you haven't really gone to work, if you haven't tidied your apartment, like nobody's going to reward you for that sort of shit. But in the markets, though, we are forced to have to understand this idea that we can actually be wrong, and we could be wrong 50% or more of the time, and we can actually still make money. We could still be successful as a trader. And again, for the vast majority of people, It goes against the belief system that we have been wired with since the very, very beginning. Okay. Another very common reason we tend to experience a lot of emotions is many of us don't like to leave money on the table, right? This is a lot of the reason which tends to drive a little bit of FOMO sometimes. For a lot of people, this is the main reason behind why we experience a little bit of greed, right? And actually, greed comes from an evolutionary perspective. If you think that our ancestors or great great ancestors, whatever it was, who had to hunt and go out and kill for essentially food on a day-to-day basis, or they had to find resources, it's much more likely that you are going to be greedy with your resources back then because you don't really know when you're going to be able to eat next. It makes more sense to actually be greedy with your resources because you don't know when you're going to get more of that thing in the future. And actually, this, from an evolutionary perspective, has something which has stuck with us, right? We have carried this mentality in terms of being greedy, whether it's to do with money, whether it's to do with food, whether it's to do with whatever else it is in life. We opt to be greedy in many situations because instinctively our mind is thinking, I don't know when I'm going to get more of this, so I need to make the most of this in this current time. But for the vast majority of us, we live in quite fortunate situations, right? If you're here, if you have the ability to tune in to a call exactly like this, then it's very, very likely you are quite fortunate in life. And I say that because there's a good percentage of the world that still don't have connection to the internet, right? They still don't have the ability to be able to log in and actually connect, browse the internet in the way that we do. There's a lot of people that don't have running water. There's a lot of people that don't have electricity, right? So we are so fortunate in most aspects of our life. And I do a lot of these calls, and I understand people are from certain countries where they don't have it as good as, I was very lucky to be born and brought up in the UK, for example. There's a lot of people that don't have that luxury, and I call it a luxury because that's exactly what it is. But again, a lot of these things in this modern day and age, we tend to look over. We also tend to experience something called regret aversion, which is this idea that we are afraid to make decisions that we might regret in the future. And when it comes to trading, this is huge, right? Because ultimately we play a game of uncertainty every time we choose to get involved in the markets. We never really know what the outcome of the next trade is going to be. And this is why, as some of you mentioned at the very beginning, it's why you tend to experience a certain level of anxiety. It's why you tend to experience a certain level of fear because you don't really know what is going to happen next. You've been taught this great, amazing strategy. You've done the back testing to see that, it could potentially work out this amount of time. But there is a part of your mind that says, what if it doesn't work? Right? What if it doesn't work? And that has to be something that you learn to live with and actually learn how to, again, regulate how you respond to that particular situation. Now, ultimately, everything that we've discussed above, and again, we've covered just a few of the most common emotions that we tend to experience. A lot of them tend to come back to an incorrect belief system. Because you could look at every single one of these situations, and if you had a different belief system, you could look at them in a completely different way. So, for example, FOMO is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because if you understand and agree with the idea that you never really know what's going to happen in the outcome of the next trade, how do you know the trade that you're thinking about jumping into is not going to be a loser instead of a winner? The problem is your belief system is wiring you to think that you're only missing out on a potential win. If I told you that your feeling of FOMO is driving you into a position, and the moment you hit buy or sell, you're going to end up taking a loss in that position, actually, you'd be quite happy to miss out, right? We have an incorrect belief system around losing money. A lot of traders do not like losing money, and this is normal for the vast majority of us. But what if your belief system was different? What if you thought that losing a small, controlled amount of money was actually a very, very good thing because then it allows you to control your downside? What if it then means that you're a better risk manager and it means that your winners are always going to outweigh your losers, which is what gives you or makes up part of your edge in the market? You see, successful traders are simply have adopted a different belief system, which allows their emotions to not have the same amount of power over them as it does for the vast majority of us, right? So losing money doesn't have to be a bad thing. For the uninformed and new traders to the market, the amateurs, right? They look at losing money as the worst fucking thing that could possibly happen to them. Whereas the experienced traders understand that if I have taken a small controlled loss that I had accepted from the beginning and I understood was a possibility, then actually I'm not mad about it. I'm actually glad that I took a small loss. I'm glad that my wrong idea didn't cost me more money. I'm glad that I was able to keep my loss as small as possible because now it means that I could be right in the, when I am right, it's going to outweigh my losses in the vast majority of times. And again, you could say a very similar thing for being wrong. Being wrong is not necessarily a bad thing. For the uninformed, being wrong is the end of the world. It goes against the belief system of what you are. But again, with the right belief system, you could look at that situation and say, actually, being wrong is a good thing, right? Being wrong and being stopped out of an idea at the very, very beginning is helpful to me because now it means that I can leverage my energy into finding my next correct idea, right? I want to be stopped out and I want to be proven wrong on this situation as quickly as possible because then it opens the door up and frees up my mind so I could think about this in a much more productive way, right? NNM has essentially said the right thing here, which is looking at things in a more positive way. And it's going to be a big part of what we talk about today, right? But it all comes from understanding that it's simply a belief system. Most of us come into this world, we're not born positive, we're not born negative. We're molded into the people that essentially we are today. And if you find someone that is an optimist, if you find someone that naturally tends to see the bright side of everything, it's because they have a belief system that has been wired a little bit differently to you. It's because they've worked at creating and curating a belief system that works a little bit differently to you. It's not because they're special, not because they're different. It's not because they possess some superhuman ability. It's something that can be trained over time, but it has to start at the deepest level. It has to start with understanding that there is another side to this situation. Okay. So I'm hoping this is clear for everyone. I'm hoping everybody is on board with all of this so far. And I'm hoping the raw foundations of what we talked about so far are all seeming to make sense, right? Emotions are a normal part of the game. Emotions are not the problem. They are usually just a symptom of the problem. And a lot of the reason that we react to the emotions the way that we do are simply because our mind is trying to avoid pain and it is trying to seek pleasure. There is a reason behind all of the emotions that we tend to experience. And again, we could take a long list of all of the ones that we tend to go through. And I could give you a breakdown of the psychology of exactly why we're experiencing them. And I explain this because I want you guys to create peace with the emotions that you're experiencing, right? Emotions are not the enemy. When you start to understand that they are just a warning light, you are going to start to open your mind to the idea that actually we can start to regulate and change what we are experiencing, and this is going to be how we can leverage and start to move forward. Okay, so just again, yes or no in the chat. Does this idea make sense to everyone? Right, everyone's on board with this idea so far. Everyone agrees at least with everything that I've mentioned so far. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about the good stuff, right? I want to give you guys a framework from what we've discussed today to help you to deal with any emotions that you can experience. Now, I'm going to leave you guys with this framework. And what I want you to do, what your exercise is going to be off the back of this, is to go away and start to think about all of the emotions that you experience, and then start to think about how you can apply this framework, these trains of thought, into transforming how you think about a situation so that you can react to them a little bit better. Okay. Now, for those of you that are going to have or may have problems with this, this is why we're going to have the active conversations in the Discord. You could reach out to me via DM. You could tag me inside of the bootcamp channel, and I can help you to connect the dots and put the pieces together as to how to apply this framework. But I'm going to do my absolute best to explain it to you on today's call itself. G6 says, all good so far. It seems like emotions are not the enemy, but something very useful we can actually leverage upon to solve the underlying problem. Perfectly said, right? Absolutely perfectly said. So, how do we actually start to regulate emotions? Well, for the vast majority of us, I tend to preach a two-step method of approaching the emotions that you experience, right? The problem is most people only plan for one method. They only plan on how to fix their emotions in one way, and it's actually the worst way, right? So the two ways that I want to talk about is a proactive way and a reactive way. And the vast majority of people focus on this. They focus on the reactive side of things. They think about, when I experience an emotion, how do I want to deal with it? How do I want to fix it? Is there something I could do? Could I breathe differently? Could I walk away from the charts? Could I start to change? There's a variety of things, and we're going to talk about some of those things, and I'm going to give you a game plan for those. But actually, I find these are the less productive methods. The place where we're going to spend most of our time today is the proactive methods. The proactive methods are the things that you can do before you've even got into a position. Before you've even hit buy or sell, there are things that you can start doing mentally that are going to put you in a far better position to help you to understand how you can fix a lot of the problems, or at least loosen the power of control that a lot of these emotions have on you. Okay. Now, firstly, if we start thinking about this idea that emotions are simply just warning lights, then one of the most powerful questions that you could ask yourself when you experience an emotion is why? Why am I experiencing this particular emotion? Because if you're saying to me, right, we discussed here that some of the common emotions that you guys experience, and again, I think I only added self-belief on here. I think everything else was added by you guys. If we started with anxiety, why am I feeling anxious in this situation? Why am I feeling anger in this situation? Why am I feeling impatient? Why am I feeling FOMO? Why am I feeling fear? When you start asking yourself why, this is the equivalent of you guys getting out your car, lifting up your bonnet, and start looking under the hood, right? Starting to dig and figure out what the underlying problem is. For example, you could look at anxiety and you could think to yourself, why am I experiencing anxiety? Why am I anxious about the outcome of this trade? Well, do I have any expectation of what the potential outcome of this trade will be? Well, no, because I haven't really done enough back testing. Well, if you haven't done enough back testing and you don't have an expectation of what may come in the future, of course you're going to be anxious. You don't know what majority of the time you're going to win. You don't know what's going to happen when you lose. You don't know how far your winners could potentially run. It's normal to feel anxious in that situation. Okay, why am I feeling angry about a specific situation? Well, what's causing my anger? Am I angry because I lost and I was wrong? Or am I angry because I actually lost money that I can't afford to lose? Well, I didn't like the idea of losing money. Why don't you like the idea of losing money? Because I don't have a lot of it to risk. Well, why don't you have a lot of it to risk? Why are you trading before you're in a position where you're risking your last $100, $500 and you're hoping that this is going to be the one, that completely works for you? When you come to the markets with a lack of capital, that severely works against you, at least psychologically, right? And it's a lot of the reason that can trickle down and come out in a response as anger to a situation, when actually the problem is you needed more capital to actually begin with. You needed more ammunition to give yourself a good runway to get started, right? So I'm hoping you guys can start to understand this. There is a lot of power behind asking yourself why you are experiencing an emotion. And again, one of our previous sessions, we talked about this idea of actually going through and asking yourself why a number of times to actually unpack why you're experiencing something, right? Why am I feeling this? Okay, why does this have power over me? Okay, why do I respond this way to this particular situation? Answering the why is going to help you to unpack what is going on beneath the surface and uncover some of your insecurities, uncover some of the lack of confidence or the fears that you may have, uh the FOMO that you may experience, right? Any one of basically these emotions, there is going to be a deeper meaning, a deeper reason why you're experiencing them. And that's going to be driving a lot of the problems that you're experiencing on the surface level, right? The second side to this is, are you working in line with your personality, lifestyle, and edge? This is such a common issue that I find so many traders running into these days, where the only thing they prioritize is their strategic edge, right? They look at and they've learned a strategy that says, I need to do this on a daily chart, I need to analyze this on an hourly chart, and then I must execute on a 5-minute chart or a 1-minute chart or a 3-minute chart or whatever it is. And the problem is, you only want to trade London and New York sessions, and you want to trade them and execute on a 5-minute chart, but you have a 9 to 5 job that keeps you occupied from 9 a.m. till 4 p.m. And basically you're fucked. You're missing out on both of those sessions, and you're getting pissed off, and you think the problem is your job, when actually in reality, you've picked a strategy which does not work for your lifestyle, right? If your lifestyle dictates that I currently have a 9 to 5 job, and you are trying to apply a strategy that does not fit in with your lifestyle, the problem is how you're approaching the market. It's not the lifestyle, it's not the job that's the problem. There are a million and one ways in which you can analyze the markets. And David is probably a good example of this, of how sometimes he will hold positions and, kind of have a swing trading approach. And sometimes he'll just have a very short-term approach to the markets. It's a prime example of how you can essentially get into a position and understand that there are many different ways to make money from the markets. And the problem is, most people are picking a strategy which does not work in terms of their lifestyle. Some people get it wrong in terms of their personality. Some people are better wired to deal with short-term responsive situations very, very quickly. Some people are better wired to deal with and operate on a 5-minute chart, on a 1-minute chart, on a 1-hour chart, something like that, right? Something fairly short-term. But if you are someone that is quite slow in how you approach things, you don't deal with volatility very, very well, then actually maybe a higher time frame is better suited to you. It could be the other way around as well. Maybe you're trying to be a swing trader, and actually you're going to be better suited to be operating on a shorter time frame, right? It can work either way around, but your personality, you're naturally going to be inclined to probably either be a better swing trader or a better intraday trader. And unless you stop to understand yourself, you're going to experience emotions off the back of that. If you like being in and out of the markets, if you like getting immediate feedback, and you're taking an approach that you have to hold a trade for an entire week, that's naturally going to work against your personality. You're naturally going to start to feel emotions off the back of that. And it's likely you haven't found the balance between these three things. So again, these are all things that you do before you even hit buy or sell. I want you to understand, what's your natural personality type? What is your current lifestyle like? And does my edge support those two elements in there? Because an edge on paper does not give you consistency in the market if you don't have the personality and lifestyle to actually be consistent with your approach. And it's a part and parcel that not enough people are actively considering on a day-to-day basis. Okay. Next, we want to talk about managing expectations. Okay. Now, actually, this is one that we've talked about quite a few times on these calls. We've talked about the idea of attachment. Expectations have come up before, and I want to dig into this a little bit further today. Now, one thing that I've stressed constantly over our last few sessions, and again, maybe this is a surprise to some of you guys, I put a lot of emphasis on backtesting, on knowing your data, on having done the work and created the foundations to actually understand how your strategy performs over time. So when we talk about the idea of managing expectations, I like to talk about this specifically from the perspective of, it should be based on data and backtesting. You see, the problem is, most people's expectations are based on hope. They're based on wishes. They're based on desires. And when your expectations are not aligned with the approach that you have in the markets, you're always going to be fucked. You're always going to be screwed when the inevitable happens and you don't get the outcomes that you're specifically looking for, right? Give me one sec. I want to see if I can copy this across into this, because this is going to be a really good example for you guys. 1 second. I don't think it's going to paste it in this box. Okay, here we go. So what I've drawn up here, or actually, I haven't created this at all. I've taken this from a website. And this website, I'm going to blow this up so you guys can see this. This website is actually based on gambling. It's based on sports betting, I think it was. I can give you a link and a source to this if you want to check it out yourself. But essentially shows you the statistics. I'll get this a little bit bigger so you guys can fully see this on the call. It gives you the statistics of the likelihood of experiencing a losing streak or a winning streak based on your specific hit rate. Now, this is nothing to do with trading. This, where I've taken this table from, is not given in the context of trading. It's given in the context of just numbers and statistics based on your hit rate. It's basically based on math. So what I want you guys to take away from this is, and the most common example that I give to this is, let's say you have a strategy that has a 50% hit rate, right? Over the next 500 trades, it says the max likely losing streak that you are likely to run into is you could have 9 losing trades in a row, right? Now, I want you guys to understand every single week that we have pretty much done this session, I don't think there's been a single week that has gone by where I haven't stressed the importance of understanding your data, doing your back testing, and it is for these exact purposes, right? When you understand your data over a large sample size of time, it starts to allow you to draw conclusions like this. And these conclusions show you that if I have a 50% win rate, I am likely at some point over the next 500 trades, I'm likely to experience 9 losing trades in a row. Now, the question that I throw back to each and every one of you, if you get pissed off after experiencing 2 or 3 losses, but your data is telling you that you could experience 9 in a row based on your strategy, which has a roughly a 50% win rate, are your expectations aligned with the reality of the market? For the vast majority of people, it's not. Because you could do absolutely everything perfectly, but because of the uncertainty of the market, you are getting pissed off when actually you're doing everything right. You've experienced 2, 3, 4, 5 losing trades in a row, and you're getting pissed off. But your data is telling you that you could experience 9. So what I want you to do is, when you guys, or hopefully you guys, are getting to the stage where you're starting to do enough backtesting, and I know this based on conversations with you guys, when you're getting into the sample sizes of being able to test your strategy over hundreds of examples and seeing this play out, this is the sort of data that I want you guys to be creating your expectations from, because this is a reality of what you can expect. And by the way, this is an example of a 50% win rate, right? My win rate on a good during a good period of time in the markets, I'm closer to 40%. That means I could experience 12 losing trades in a row. If you are someone that has a 20 to 30% hit rate, look at the likely losing streak that you could experience. If you have 60 to 70%, look at the likely losing streak that you could experience. And again, this is not fixed. This is not saying if you go over this, you've specifically done something wrong. This is to give you a likelihood of what you could experience. But again, it's to create a good foundation for your expectations. So what I say to most people, and what I stress off the back of this, is I want you to be focusing on some specific things when it comes to creating the right expectations. Some of those things are, well, fuck that up. Let me, okay. Some of those things are exactly like what we talked about above, which is knowing your win rate. It's a very, very important metric to be able to understand. Your data will also tell you on average how many opportunities you get in the market, right? On average, over the space of the last 500 trades, how many trades do I get on average over the space of a day, a week, a month, right? This is based on data and not based on, hopes, wishes, desires. What should your targets be in the market, right? How far do your trades actually run for? Can you get 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, 1 to 2, 1 to 1? What gives you the best odds of actually being successful in the long run? These are all things which can be derived from actually knowing your data a little bit better, right? And so I'm hoping week by week it's becoming clearer as to why I put so much stress and emphasis on backtesting. The more you know your numbers, the more likely you are to be able to align your expectations correctly with the market. So often when I've been through these boot camps and people telling me that I think one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning was I get angry when I experience a loss. Well, now that you have the correct foundations, the questions that I'm going to be asking you, okay, cool. Based on your strategy, what is your average win rate? And then based on the data, the number, the stats, the math behind your win rate, what is the average number of losers that you may experience over a large enough sample size? And if you're getting pissed off before you've hit that potential number, then I would argue that actually your expectations for what may happen in the market are completely misaligned with how the market is actually going to present to you, right? Hoping that makes sense to absolutely everybody, okay? Couple other things that I want to stress at this point. It's down. Outside of knowing your expectations, there should only ever really be 3 outcomes to any trade. Can't remember if I've shared this with you guys on a previous session, but I want to re-emphasize that because it helps when we're talking about having the right expectations. There should only ever be 3 outcomes to any particular trade: a small loss, a small win, or a big win. Perfect, right? 11's clearly keeping notes. Small loss, small win, or a big win. If you have fully accepted before you get into a position that my potential trade could be one of these potential outcomes, how could the market ever disappoint you? And the answer is it couldn't. If you fully accepted that I could have a small loss and you experience a small loss, expectations have been met by the market. Therefore, there is no clash, there is no conflict. If you believe that I could have a small win and you achieve a small win, no clash in expectations, right? I want you guys to really enforce this idea from the very beginning. And the things that you could be asking yourself is, am I comfortable in taking this loss, and specifically win as well, right? A lot of greed, overconfidence comes from not fully accepting that you may actually win the amount of money that you're expecting. You may not actually be prepared to have the amount of money on the table than you're thinking. If you're used to making, if you're saying that I'm risking $100 per trade and your upside on a potential winner is $500 and $500 is 1 week at work to you, that might feel significant. That might get you excited. That might make you emotional. And so I want you to be comfortable with both the loss and the win so you're prepared for any outcomes that the market may represent. Okay. Lastly, and then we're going to move on to talking about a few reactive ways to deal with things. I want you guys to open up your perspective about the markets, right? The story of the Chinese farmer. Has anyone ever heard of this idea, right? The Chinese farmer and the horses. Has anyone heard this story or this perspective before? It's a very, very short story. I'm literally going to take me about 2 minutes to read it out to you guys. But the first time I heard it, it completely transformed my perspective on absolutely everything in life, right? I'm going to share it with you guys because I think it's a really, really powerful story and it will do you some good in understanding how you can actually apply this to trading, right? So the story of the Chinese farmer. G6 says, gotta go, appreciate the session. We'll finish off and watch the recording. No worries, man. So the story of the Chinese farmer. Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. Bear with me. Sounds weird. It has complete context to what we're doing. Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. That evening, all of his neighbors came around to commiserate. And they said, we're sorry to hear your horse has run away. This is really, really unfortunate. And the farmer turns around and he says, maybe. The next day, the horse came back and it actually brought back with it 7 other wild horses. And in the evening, all of the neighbors came around again and said, God, that's so lucky. What a great turn of events. You now have 8 horses. And the farmer again turned around and said, maybe. The following day, the farmer's son tried to break in one of the wild horses, and while riding it, he was thrown from the horse and the son broke his leg. And the neighbors came around that evening and said, oh shit, that's really unfortunate. That's too bad. And the farmer said, maybe, right? The next day, conscription officers came around to conscript people into the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And again, all of the neighbors came around and said, God, that's so lucky. Isn't that great that your son didn't have to go into the army? And the farmer said, maybe, right? Now, the moral of this story, again, sounds completely left field. I'm sure a lot of you guys are thinking, what the fuck does this have to do with trading? The moral of this story is that it's impossible to tell whether anything that happens in life is good or bad, because you never know what is going to be the consequence of something bad that happens, and you never know what is going to be the consequence of something good that happens, right? You could have something really, really lucky for you today. You could win a car, right? You could win a competition and win a brand new car, but that car, because you're not used to the amount of power that it maybe has, you could lose control and you could get into a terrible accident and you could lose both your legs in that fucking accident. Winning that car might be the worst thing that ever fucking happened to you, even if it started out as the best possible thing, right? Now, let's start to apply this to the context of trading. Taking a loss, blowing an account, losing a challenge, right? All of these things which so many of us are struggle with emotionally could be the best possible thing that ever happens, because our biggest breakthrough in the markets could happen as a result of the emotions or the lessons that we have learned from that particular experience. Blowing that last challenge could be the best possible thing that happened to you, because it led you to your big breakthrough. It connected you with someone that allowed you to find the missing piece to the puzzle, right? There are so many different ways in which you could flip your perspective, and NNM is right? Everything happens for a reason, but only if you choose to open your mind to that idea. And it's a complete way to just shift your perspective to allow you to understand that there is a different side or a different way of thinking that can completely transform your approach to the markets, right? NNM says, if I hadn't failed my last exam, I wouldn't have gotten into the boot camp, and it's been the best thing that ever happened to me when I thought it was the worst. It's a prime example, right? A perfect example of how you can start to apply this. The problem is most people don't ever get this perspective without time. Most people, it's much easier to connect the dots looking backwards. And what I want you guys to start doing is actually remembering that this perspective always exists. You could go through the worst possible situation that you could ever imagine today, and I want you to understand that it could be the best possible thing to happen, but only if you choose it to be, right? I want you to remember that changing your perspective doesn't change a situation. It often just changes how you feel about the situation. And in the majority of cases, actually sitting down, kicking yourself about a specific situation is not going to be the best thing for you, right? It's not going to lead you to feel more empowered or to do something positive off the back of this. If you can shift your perspective, you can turn that negative into a positive, and you can start to think about things in a completely different way, right? You can start to think about things. This loss was a good thing because now I learned this, this, and this. It has reinforced the idea that I need to do this, or I shouldn't be doing this. Maya says, I agree to a point. It's important to take responsibility for your actions rather to rely on fate. And Myers, I completely agree. I'm not at any point here implying that you should just rely on fate and let the world play its hand. This is me saying that you have to be responsible for what you're doing, and you have to be open to changing your mind to finding those positives in every situation, right? I too don't believe on the idea that the world should just work for us and all of these things should just happen to us. I believe it's under your control, your responsibility. You have to be accountable to make those situations play out in the way that you would like, okay? So these would be my go-to methods when it comes to a proactive response to the markets, right? You need to understand why you're experiencing an emotion. You need to make sure that your personality, your lifestyle, and your edge are working in alignment together, because then otherwise you're introducing a whole variety of emotions. And you need to make sure that you are managing your expectations the right way. And that's including knowing your data, understanding your win rate, accepting the outcomes of any trade, and then making sure from before the get-go that you have opened your mind to the idea that you can shift your perspective to start thinking in a completely different way, right? Which may help you in the long run, right? The other side to this is we've talked a lot about the proactive side, and I warned you guys from the beginning, it is the side that I spend most of my time on, because I think this is the side that most people neglect. Now, I'm not saying that you're ever going to be perfect. I'm not saying that just because you've done all the proactive stuff, you're going to eliminate and never feel an emotion again. I am on board with the idea that if you do and you spend enough time and energy focusing on those proactive methods, you're going to be able to reduce the control most of your emotions have, right? They will lose power over you. However, I still think it's beneficial to have a plan of how to deal with emotions when they creep up in the moment, right? It's good to have that reactive plan of what to do when, even if you've done everything you possibly could to try and help reduce the emotions that you may experience, what do you do in the moment to make sure that you can regulate what you're feeling? Well, few things. The first thing I would recommend is journaling. And specifically, there's a few things that I want you to write down when you're experiencing certain emotions. So the first thing you could be writing down is this thought or emotion actually true? Right? Because for some of you, what some people tend to do is when they experience a negative thought or an emotion, it sends them on a spiral of negativity in terms of self-talk, which doesn't really lead them to a good place. They take a loss and they start saying things like, I'm a failure. Of course it was going to be a loss. I can't make a winning trade. And I want you to actually stop and check yourself and ask yourself, is this emotion actually true? Right? Is this thought, does it have any truth to it? Because some people will say, I can't take a winning trade. And actually, does your journal reflect that? Have you ever taken a winning trade before? Because then it's likely what you're doing is you're letting short-term emotions actually spiral into something which is not actually true. Giving yourself some perspective can actually help you to recognize that you are doing everything that you can within your power. And actually, many of the things that you're experiencing mentally are not based on reality. They're based on a subjective reality that your mind is trying to create. And again, it's doing this from the perspective of your mind is trying to get you to take action to alleviate the short-term pain. When sometimes the best thing that you need to do is just reflect and understand that the best thing to do in this moment is usually not to act impulsively, it's to wait, it's to be patient, right? One of the other things that you can be doing as part of your journals, and again, we've talked about this on one of our previous sessions, is to give yourself a score based on your strategy or based on how you executed your strategy. Because remember, you can't control the outcome of a situation. You can only control how you get in, how you manage, and how you exit the market, and how much risk you attach to each of those decisions, right? If you are scoring yourself based on your strategy, then you understand you are controlling everything within your power. And when you stop and you journal these things throughout the time, it can actually be a fantastic way to help your mind to focus on the idea that I am focusing on the things that I can control, and I'm starting to eliminate the things that I simply do not have any control over, right? Outside of this, one of the things, well, this is probably one of my favorite things that I recommend, is a technique called box breathing, right? Very, very simple technique, but very, very effective at helping you to align your mind and your body when they seem to lose sync. And what I mean by that is logically, you know that you shouldn't be reacting to FOMO. Logically, you know that you shouldn't act on anger. You shouldn't be impatient. You shouldn't do basically all of the stupid shit that we described as a result of some of these emotions, but we tend to fall victim to it, right? And what tends to happen is your mind knows what to do, but you can't seem to stop your body from acting on those emotions. Box breathing, not sure if any of you guys are familiar with it or ever tried it before, very, very powerful way to bring you back to the present moment and help you to regulate some of the emotions that are getting carried away internally. Now, the best thing I would recommend is if you go onto YouTube and you type in guided box breathing, it will actually take you to a video. I think it's the first or second one in that I usually recommend. I'll put up a resource. I'll put up a link to this when I upload the resources for this. Box breathing, but essentially brings you back to the present moment, keeps you locked into what is happening now, and it helps you to basically, I'm not going to say ignore, but reduce the power that the emotions experience over you. So for anyone that is unfamiliar with the practice, box breathing is very, very simple. You're going to inhale for the count of 4 to 5 seconds. So you're going to breathe in. So it's going to be, once you've inhaled, you're going to hold your breath with all that breath that you've taken in for 4 to 5 seconds. So you're going to hold. And then after that, you're going to exhale for 4 to 5 seconds. So you're going to breathe out all of that air. So, and once you've breathed all the air out, you're then going to hold your breath on the exhale, right? So no breath in you, you've breathed all your air out, and you're going to hold on the exhale for another 4 to 5 seconds. And you're going to repeat this process for around 3 to 5 minutes. Now, the reason I like this practice so much is what you're going to find is it engages your body through the breathing, and it engages your mind through the counting, which makes it very, very difficult to focus on any of the other stupid shit that you're focusing on. The anger, the FOMO, lack of self-belief, all of these other equipment. Once you've watched the video 2 or 3 times, you're going to be able to do very, very simply without any guided tutorials. And it can be done in less than 5 minutes throughout your trading day. And again, it's a very, very powerful way to just bring you back to the present moment. Maya says, I find a good reactive method is to practice mindfulness, recognize when you're feeling the emotion and do not let it control your action. For example, I'm feeling boredom. I recognize the boredom and plan an entry based on my system versus impulsively getting into the market or distract myself by doing something else whilst I wait for my triggers. Myers is perfect, right? And this is exactly what the breathwork technique can help you to actually achieve. Because again, and the reason I mention this is what you've listed here, Myers, people know this is what they should do. What they lack is an ability to actually be able to follow through with this. And so what I say to most people, if you're getting to the point where you're feeling like you can't control, you can't do anything except act on your emotions, go down the route of box breathing. And I promise you, it's going to help to regulate exactly what you're experiencing. And it's going to make it far easier to then go through the process that you're talking about here, Miles, right? Which is document the emotion, identify how you should be reacting to this, and then going through exactly what you're doing. And all of what you've described here is actually going to be helped with the process of journaling as well, right? Actually asking yourself, is the thought or emotion true, requires you to be aware of the emotion. So it's all part and parcel of the process, okay? The last thing I want to give you guys as a reactive response is actually going back to the idea of perspective. So we talked about this in terms of the a proactive approach, right? We talked about the story of the Chinese farmer. Actually, in the moment, there are things and ways that you can start thinking which are going to be really, really beneficial as well. For example, you can start asking yourself very empowering questions to completely flip your train of thought. So the mind is a very complex tool, but actually it can be controlled very, very simply by starting to ask yourself more empowering questions. So for example, if you were to stop during your trading day and ask yourself, how could this be worse? You just had a losing trade. How could that situation be worse? Well, you could have blown your entire fucking account. You could have been locked out of your brokerage and not be able to trade for the remainder of the week, right? You could, your laptop could have broken after getting so pissed off after your last trade, and then you would have had to replace your laptop as well as accepting the money of the lost trade, right? How could this situation be worse? There are 1,000,001 different ways in which you can make a situation worse in your head. And the moment you realize that it could be worse, you can start to be grateful for the fact that it wasn't worse, right? You could get into a car accident today and your car could be completely damaged, but you could be completely fine. And you could think to yourself, well, what if that situation had been worse for me? What if the accident was really bad and I need to go for surgery? Well, now actually I'm thankful it was just my car that was messed up and it was nothing to do with me. I'm still in an okay position. Again, going back to this idea of always looking on the bright side, right? Another way to flip your perspective, which I really like, is to ask yourself, how would a professional trader manage this situation, right? Getting yourself to envision the end goal, getting yourself to envision exactly how you want to be reacting in a specific situation by envisioning what that professional trader does and then mimicking their approach. This short process of shifting the perspective and visualizing what that professional trader does is going to give you an ability to be able to think about a situation from the perspective of the type of person that you are wanting to become. And when you open your mind to doing this, it's going to allow you to become much more effective at dealing with all of the shitty situations that the market may actually present. Okay. Guys and girls, that concludes today's session, right? So I'm hoping this is a good framework for you guys to take away and actually start thinking about how do you want to start responding to a lot of the emotions and the triggers that come up on a day-to-day basis. Okay. So for those of you that feel like you're still going to struggle, I want you to take away this framework from both the proactive and the reactive side. And I want you to come up with a game plan of what to do as opposed to what you're already doing. So if you're someone that struggles with the anger of experiencing a loss, for example, I want you to go through and actually ask yourself, why are losses so hurtful for you? Why do they make you so angry? Ask yourself the questions about working in line with your personality. Ask yourself if you're managing your expectations right and if you've aligned them with the data based on your back testing, right? Remember to think about your win rate, the opportunities, accept any outcome that the market is going to present. Remember the story of the Chinese farmer and then have that reactive plan ready as well, right? Think about the method that's going to work best for you. Next time I get angry, I actually want to attempt and try a method of box breathing and seeing how this works specifically for me, right? So for those of you that are experiencing these emotions that are holding power over you, I want to hear from you inside the Discord this week. If you want to shoot me a DM, feel free. If you want to post openly inside the Discord and talk about this is the emotion that I have or I'm currently experiencing with, and based on the framework in which we discussed today, this is what I am going to try going into this week to see if it changes or influences how I react to my emotions going forward. Okay. I'm hoping that's clear for everyone. Hoping that's everyone's on board with what we need to be doing off the back of today. Before we wrap up, any questions? Anything that anybody wants to ask? It could be based on today's session. It could be based on psychology in general. Any specific questions? NNM says, I have a general doubt. Many times it happens to me in my day-to-day life that I don't have patience with my goals. I'm disciplined and all that, but it's like I need to reach my goals now because I feel like that I'm running out of time, that I'm late to achieve my goals and then enjoy myself. This often makes me run in trading and not enjoy or follow the process well in my day. And I feel bad because I see far away the goal and I feel that I'm running out of time. Okay, so a few things I want you to do from here, NNM. Few different ways that I want to actually unpack this for you. Firstly, you've mentioned that you feel like you need to reach your goals now and that you feel like you're running out of time. For the vast majority of people, I want you to understand where that perspective of feeling like you're behind has come from. A lot of the time, that perspective comes from family, it comes from friends, and in this day and age, for a lot of the time, it comes from social media. It gives you this sense of urgency to think that you're falling behind. You're not where you should be by your specific age, and it's putting you into this state of constantly trying to rush the process, right? Miser said it perfectly. It's you versus you yesterday and not others, right? And I agree. For a lot of people, social media is a big, big reason why we are falling behind in a lot of situations. So firstly, I would say identify where that sense of urgency has coming from, because clearly it's not doing you any good, right? It's not putting you into a place where it's allowing you to be patient and do the things that you're supposed to do. So the important thing that you need to do is identify the trigger, where that sense of urgency is coming from, and then seeing if you can limit your time and energy away from it. Stop having the conversations with friends and family that don't believe in your dreams. Start unfollowing and muting and blocking the people on social media that are creating that sense of urgency, that are making you feel behind. It might be the lifestyle marketers. It might be the people that are telling you that you're not working hard enough. Whatever it is, identify the source and start to eliminate it, because the more you can get rid of that trigger, the more it's going to help you to be patient. The second side of this, and again, I'm going to take you back to a concept that we talked about on many previous sessions, which is, what is your current approach actually doing for you? Is it bringing you closer to your goals, or is it taking you further away? If it's taking you further away, I want you to understand and amplify the pain of what you're experiencing. Remember, your mind is constantly moving away from pain and it's constantly seeking pleasure. If you are taking action to try and rush the process, and you're doing it because your mind believes that there is a reward attached to that, what you need to actually show your mind is, by rushing the process, you're forcing yourself to actually be in a worse off position, and that's what's actually slowing you down. So use the amplify the pain technique, which we talked about many times on these calls, for the specific cost of rushing the process and doing what that's doing for you, right? And then I want you to amplify that by some of the things that we've talked about today. Flip the perspective of how you're currently thinking. Start thinking to yourself, what if I expanded my timeline or horizon of my goals, right? What if I understood that actually, if it took me 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, because my goals are big and broad enough and they are strong enough for me to believe in, it doesn't really matter how long it may take for me. If I achieve my goals in 6 months or 6 years from now, it's fucking worth it. Because that's what it came, genuinely speaking, that's what it came down to me with trading. I lost money for my first 6 years of trading because I neglected doing all the shit that I was supposed to do. And I'm not saying after 6 years I became this amazing, multi-millionaire off the back of it. After 6 years, I hit break-even stage, and that lasted another few years. I had to ask myself, after losing money for 6 years, why the fuck am I doing this? Why do I want to be a trader? And part of that process was realigning what my vision is for the future and understanding that even if it took me another 10 to 15 years, but then I got to live the rest of my life on my terms, it's fucking worth it, right? Not having to go, into an office every single day, not having to report to someone every single day, being in control of my own time, my own freedom, all of that sort of shit, that was worth it for me in the end. It doesn't matter whether it took 6 months or 6 years. That was what I settled on, this idea, right? And it was a matter of flipping my perspective around time. When your why is powerful enough, then the timeline in which you hope to create success, you will realize is not that important. What is actually important is doing the right things every single day to get you closer to the person that you want to become. Okay. So NNM, I hope that gives you something to work on and start to figure out during the space of this week. Any other questions that you guys would like me to address before we wrap up? Otherwise, I will leave you guys to enjoy your Saturdays. Okay, perfect. If anybody else obviously does have any questions, obviously feel free to reach out to me on Discord. For those of you in here, for those of you that are going to watch this back on a recording, as I mentioned, feel free to DM me or get involved in the Discord. Tell me what your plan is on how you plan to overcome some of the emotions that you're experiencing most. And if you're stuck, if you don't know how to apply the framework, I want you guys to try this for yourself first. But if you're really stuck, please tag me, let me know, and I will start helping you to connect the dots to show you how to apply the framework for your specific situation. Okay. But otherwise, that is your exercise this week. I will leave you guys to enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will speak to you again, probably same sort of time next week. Take care, guys.